Claire Bennett stood at the edge of her glass balcony, the cool evening breeze brushing her face as she stared into the skyline of Lagos. The city glittered below her, endless lights shimmering like stars. But inside her, everything felt hollow. She was the only child of the late Richard and Gloria Bennett, founders of Bennett Global Industries. Their sudden death in a plane crash 5 years ago had left her with everything: an empire of businesses, luxury estates, and more money than she could ever spend. But as she stood there, wrapped in a cashmere robe that cost more than most people's annual salaries, she had never felt more empty. Her phone vibrated. A message from her fiancé, Gregory. Running late. Meeting overran. Love you. She didn't reply. Something had been bothering her for weeks. Gregory had become distant, too interested in her finances, too smooth with his words. Claire had always wanted to believe someone would love her beyond her wealth, but history had taught her otherwise. Every relationship she'd had ended the same way: deceit, betrayal, and heartbreak. Her wealth attracted suitors like bees to honey, but none stayed for her. Claire turned from the balcony and walked through the penthouse, her heels clicking on polished marble floors. She entered Gregory's study, a room he had insisted on using whenever he stayed over. Her fingers brushed over the oak desk when a blinking light on the corner of his tablet caught her eye. She wasn't snooping. At least, that's what she told herself as she tapped the screen. The screen lit up, revealing a recent audio recording. Claire's finger hovered for a moment before pressing play. Gregory's voice came through. "Relax now, baby," he chuckled, smooth and cruel. "Once I get the money from Claire, I'm out. We'll finally have everything we dreamed of. She's blind with love. It'll be over soon." Silence. Then, a woman's voice responded with a flirtatious laugh. "She really believes you're in love with her?" Gregory laughed again. "Oh, she's too naive. Just a little longer and we're set." The tablet slipped from Claire's trembling hands, clattering onto the desk. Her knees buckled. She dropped into the leather chair, cold dread tightening around her chest. She had trusted him. She had opened her heart. Again. How many times would she be fooled? Her entire body shook. Anger, shame, sorrow, everything boiled in her blood. She couldn't breathe. Her hands clenched the arms of the chair as the words repeated in her mind. She's blind with love. Just a little longer. She had to get out. Of the room. Of this life. Of everything. The next morning, Claire called her assistant, Rachel, to the penthouse. Rachel had worked with the Bennett family for over a decade. She had been more than an assistant. She had been a friend, a confidant, someone Claire could always count on. Rachel arrived within the hour, her eyes wide with concern. "Claire, you sounded shaken. What's wrong?" Claire, still in the same robe from the night before, sat at the edge of her velvet chaise, gripping a cup of untouched coffee. "I can't do this anymore," she said. "Do what?" "This life. These men. Everyone only sees my money. No one sees me." Rachel sat across from her slowly. "Claire, what happened?" Claire relayed everything. The audio, Gregory's betrayal, the pattern of lies that had become her love life. Rachel listened, her brows furrowing, her mouth a thin line. "I need to disappear," Claire said finally, her voice firm. "I need to find someone who'll love me without the name, without the mansion, without the empire." Rachel blinked. "Disappear? I'll go to another city. Change everything about me. Disguise myself, maybe as someone no one would ever suspect." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "What if I pretended to be blind? A beggar?" Rachel's eyes widened in horror. "Claire, that's extreme." "It's the only way to strip away everything," Claire said. "If I meet someone then, someone who sees me as a helpless stranger and still shows kindness, then maybe I'll know it's real." Rachel hesitated. "You're serious about this?" Claire nodded. "Completely. I'll leave Bennett Global in your hands. You're the only one I trust. Tell the board I'm traveling for wellness, a private retreat. I'll send updates through you when I can." Rachel exhaled slowly. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. This isn't a movie, Claire. Life on the streets isn't a game." "I know, but I have to do this." 2 days later, Claire Bennett, the heiress of one of Nigeria's largest empires, vanished. She took nothing but a small duffel bag, a walking stick, a pair of dark sunglasses, and a few hundred naira in cash. No credit cards, no IDs, no jewelry. She dressed in worn jeans and a faded T-shirt with shawl wrapped around her hair. She took a bus, not a private jet, to the small town of Elmsworth, a quiet community far from Lagos. The people were kind, simple, and unaware of headlines. It was perfect. Claire found a quiet corner by the central market. She sat against a faded concrete wall near a pharmacy. Her face was smudged with dust, her eyes hidden behind glasses, her hands shaking as she placed a metal bowl beside her feet. She tapped her walking stick twice and whispered, "God, please, help me see what love really is." People passed. Some looked, some stared, some ignored her completely. No one stopped, until one man did. A shadow loomed over her. Claire kept her head down, following the character she had built. She heard a soft voice. "Hello, my sister." She lifted her head slightly. A man, around 30, crouched in front of her. He wore a simple shirt, slightly worn jeans, and his palms were rough, working hands. His eyes were gentle. "What's your name?" he asked. "Claire," she whispered. "Claire," he repeated with warmth. "What happened to you? Why are you here like this?" Claire swallowed the knot in her throat. "I lost my sight and my family. I have no one." The man's eyes clouded with sympathy. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled notes. "It's not much, but maybe you can get some bread and water." Claire blinked. The metal bowl clinked as the money dropped in. "Thank you," she whispered. The man stood. He hesitated, turned, then stopped. He looked back once more. That look, the one that lingered, was the moment something in Claire's heart stirred. She didn't know his name yet, but she would, and soon he would change everything. Claire Bennett had never known what it meant to be invisible, until now. Gone were the pearl earrings, the chauffeur-driven Bentley, the tailored suits. In their place were scuffed shoes, a sun-bleached T-shirt, and second-hand denim jeans that hung awkwardly on her once-sculpted frame. She had traded her silk pillows for concrete, her branded perfume for the scent of market dust, sweat, and exhaust. It was early evening in Elmsworth, and the sky blushed with hues of orange and purple. Claire sat at her chosen corner just outside the small neighborhood pharmacy, her metal bowl resting by her sandal feet. Her dark sunglasses hid her searching eyes. Her white cane leaned against the wall beside her, like a prop in a poorly rehearsed play. It had been 3 days since she arrived. 3 long, uncomfortable, soul-wrenching days. People passed her by, most without a word. Some with looks of suspicion, others with brief pity. Only a few dropped coins. None stayed. None asked questions, except one, the man with the kind eyes and rough hands. He had returned that same evening, brought her a sachet of water and a meat pie wrapped in old newspaper. He had said his name was Jake Morgan, and he had smiled like he meant it. Jake was a man of simple habits. His provision store, Morgan's Essentials, was modest but dependable. He stocked biscuits, beverages, powdered milk, toiletries, and sometimes eggs and bread on weekends. The store stood just 2 streets away from where Claire sat, and every day he watched her from afar. The first time he saw her, something in her posture tugged at him. She didn't shout or stretch out her hand like other beggars. She just sat there, quiet, still, dignified, even in her brokenness. By the 3rd day, Jake couldn't take it anymore. That evening, he closed his shop early and walked back to where Claire usually sat. She was there, as expected, her face tilted slightly downward as if listening to some private sorrow. He crouched again. "Claire?" She lifted her head. "I've been thinking," he began. "This isn't right. You shouldn't be sleeping out here. It's not safe." Claire's heart thudded. She didn't speak. Jake pulled out his phone. "I have a sister, Sophie. She lives nearby. I want to see if she can help, just for a few days, until I figure something else out." "No, please," Claire started, but he was already dialing. Sophie Morgan was not one for sentiment. She worked as a nurse assistant at a local clinic and was as sharp with her words as she was with a needle. She came home that day, worn out and already irritated when her phone rang. "Jake, I just walked in." I know, he said quickly. "But I need a favor." Her silence said she was already skeptical. "There's this woman I met. Her name's Claire. She's blind. Alone. She's been outside the pharmacy all week. Sophie. She has no one." A pause. "And you wanted to take her in?" "Just for a few days," Jake pleaded. "Please." "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important." Another pause. Sophie sighed heavily. "Fine, but don't bring me trouble." Jake helped Claire to her feet, gently guiding her hand to his elbow. For a brief moment, she panicked. She hadn't anticipated things moving so quickly, but she couldn't refuse, not without giving herself away. They walked slowly to Sophie's apartment on Maple Lane. The town was quiet that night, the streetlights flickering to life as night took hold. Jake explained that Sophie lived alone, that their parent had passed away years ago, and that Sophie didn't trust easily. "She's a bit sharp," Jake warned, "but she has a good heart." Claire only nodded. Sophie opened the door with narrowed eyes and crossed arms. "So this is Claire?" "Yes," Jake said. "Claire, this is my sister Sophie." "Come in," she said stiffly. Claire stepped inside. The apartment was small but clean. A narrow living room flowed into a compact kitchen. A hallway to the right led to 2 bedrooms. A fan whirred overhead, barely cutting through the heat. "You can use the spare room," Sophie said, already walking toward it. "Don't expect much. The mattress is thin and the sheets are clean. That's about all I can offer." Claire gave a soft smile. "Thank you." Sophie didn't smile back. That night, Claire lay on the narrow mattress, listening to the muffled sounds of a new world. Distant honks. Children laughing in the streets. The smell of boiling beans from a neighbor's kitchen. The ticking of Sophie's wall clock. She couldn't sleep. Her back ached from the floor. Her pride ached more. But her heart felt something strange. Was this what normal felt like? Was this what real life tasted like? Hard, raw, but somehow sincere? The days passed slowly. Sophie remained distant, speaking only when necessary. Jake, however, came every evening, sometimes with sachets of water, other times with a loaf of bread or small ingredients. He stayed to cook on the 3rd day. The jollof rice was slightly burnt, but he served it with fried fish and laughter. Claire found herself smiling more. She didn't have to fake anything, except the blindness. One evening, as Jake sat beside her after dinner, he asked softly, "Claire, what happened to your eyes?" She stiffened. It was an accident. Years ago." "Do you need surgery?" he asked. Claire hesitated. "They said it could help, but it's expensive. I've never had enough to even consider it." Jake went quiet. She dared not look at him. Even if she wasn't blind, her guilt was real. She had lied. Every day, she sank deeper into the hole she had dug. But Jake kept being Jake. The next day, he came with a plan. That night, Claire overheard him speaking to Sophie in the kitchen. "She needs help," he said. "You're already helping," Sophie replied. "But for how long?" Jake sighed. "I've been thinking maybe I can sell the land in ABA. The one Dad left me. That should raise enough for her surgery." Sophie's voice rose in disbelief. "You want to sell Dad's land?" "Jake, that's the only inheritance we have." "She needs a chance to see again, Sophie. Isn't that worth something?" Claire pressed her hands to her mouth, trembling. He would give up everything for her? A lie. She couldn't let him do it. She wouldn't. The moment had arrived. The turning point she hadn't expected so soon. Claire sat in the dim room that night, her sunglasses in her lap, her walking stick resting by the door. She stared at nothing, feeling everything. She had come here searching for love. But what she found was far more dangerous. Kindness. The kind that made her question every lie she had told. And now, if she didn't act quickly, Jake would lose the one thing he had left, just to save someone who didn't need saving at all. The scent of fried plantain lingered in the air, mingling with the faint smell of antiseptic and laundry soap. Claire sat on a wooden stool in Sophie's kitchen, her hands folded neatly in her lap, listening to Jake hum as he stirred porridge on the stove. It had been nearly a week since she moved into the modest apartment. In that time, Claire had learned things that no billionaire heiress could learn from a penthouse suite. How to sweep a floor without a housekeeper, how to share one bathroom with two others, and how to eat one meal a day and feel satisfied, because it was made with kindness. But she also learned something more unsettling. The guilt didn't go away. It grew. Sophie had been cold at first, but not cruel. Her suspicion never faded completely, though she had begun speaking more, short sentences, small questions. Claire knew Sophie was trying, in her own way, to accept the stranger living under her roof. But Jake was different. He never looked at her with pity, only with hope. And hope, Claire realized, was far more dangerous than money. "Dinner's ready," Jake said with a grin, lifting the pot lid. The aroma of yam porridge filled the room, making Claire's stomach growl. Sophie came out of her bedroom, her face tired from another long shift at the clinic. She barely glanced at Claire as she sat at the rickety dining table. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the clink of spoons and the hum of a nearby generator filling the room. Then Sophie spoke. "Jake, how long is she staying?" Claire's hand froze midair. Jake cleared his throat. "As long as she needs." Sophie dropped her spoon. "You can't keep doing this. We're not a charity. And you," she looked at Claire, "you've barely spoken. We don't know anything about you." Claire kept her head low, playing her role. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll leave if I'm causing trouble." "No one's asking you to leave," Jake interjected. "She's been through enough." Sophie stood. "I'm going to bed. You figure this out, Jake." She left the kitchen, the tension thick in the air. Claire swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." Jake turned to her. "Don't be." Sophie's protective. "That's all. She's had a hard life." Claire looked down at her bowl. "She's right, though. You don't know me. You're helping a stranger." Jake leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Maybe, but something in me says you're not just any stranger." Claire's breath caught. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully. Jake offered a small smile. "You sit here like someone used to better things. You say very little, but you watch everything. And when you talk, it's like you're choosing each word like it costs money." Claire froze. He was perceptive. Too perceptive. "Why help me, then?" she asked. "Because I'd want someone to do the same for my sister or for me." Later that night, Claire lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slowly above her. The truth itched inside her like a wound she couldn't scratch. She was falling for Jake, not just for his kindness, but for his soul. He was the first man who didn't ask what she owned, who didn't assume she owed him something. He didn't know her name, her background, her wealth, and he didn't care. That scared her more than anything, because if he found out who she truly was, would that change everything? The next morning, Claire woke up to the sound of Jake and Sophie arguing in the hallway. "You're serious? Sell Dad's land?" "For her." Sophie's voice was sharp, disbelieving. Claire froze. Jake's voice was calm, but firm. "It's all I have, but if it means she can see again, if it gives her a second chance, then yes, I'll do it." Sophie hissed. "She's a stranger. You barely know her." Jake paused, then said softly, "And maybe that's why it matters, because someone has to believe in her." Claire's breath caught. The words hit her like a hammer. He would give up his inheritance for her, for someone he believed was blind and destitute, someone who had lied to him every day since they met. Tears filled her eyes. She had come to find true love, but now she saw something deeper. True love demanded truth. That evening, Jake arrived again with fresh vegetables and a small bag of rice. "Let's make something together," he said, smiling. Claire nodded, her throat tight. As he chopped onions and lit the small gas stove, she sat beside him, her mind swirling. This was the moment. She couldn't let him go through with it, not without knowing the truth. She stood slowly and walked toward him, her walking stick tapping gently against the floor. "Jake," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up. "Yeah. There's something I need to tell you." He wiped his hands on a towel and turned to face her. Claire removed her sunglasses. "I'm not blind." Silence. Jake stared at her, not understanding. "What?" "I'm not blind," she repeated. "And I'm not poor." Jake's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. "I lied," Claire said, her voice cracking. "My name is Claire Bennett. I'm the heir to Bennett Global. I left Lagos and came here pretending to be blind to find someone who could love me without knowing who I was." Jake blinked. "Claire Bennett?" "The Claire Bennett." Claire nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Jake stepped back, his expression unreadable. "So all of this was fake?" "No," she said quickly. "The blindness, yes. The poverty, yes. But not my feelings. Not what I've seen in you. That's real." Jake's jaw clenched. "You let me believe I was about to sell my father's land. I didn't know how to tell you. You should have told me before I made plans to give up everything." Claire dropped to her knees, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I didn't mean to hurt you." He turned away. "I need some air." Without another word, he walked out the door, leaving Claire crumpled on the floor. Sophie, who had overheard everything from the hallway, stepped into the kitchen slowly. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You really are Claire Bennett?" Claire nodded through her tears. Sophie let out a long sigh. "You made a mistake. A huge one. But you didn't have to lie to us to find love." "I was scared," Claire whispered. "Everyone always wants something from me. I just wanted to know what love felt like without the money in the way." Sophie crossed her arms. "Well, now you know what it feels like to lose it." Claire buried her face in her hands, her voice breaking. "I ruined everything." Sophie watched her for a long time, then sat beside her. "You might have ruined the beginning," she said quietly. "But maybe, just maybe even fix the ending." The days that followed were drenched in silence. Jake didn't come by the apartment. His evening visits, once the warmest part of Claire's day, were suddenly absent. Sophie returned from work each night, said little, and shut herself in her room. The house, once filled with the aroma of porridge and Jake's awkward laughter, now echoed with unspoken words. Claire stayed mostly in the spare room, her sunglasses folded on the bedside table. The walking stick rested beside the wall, like a monument to her greatest lie. She hadn't meant to hurt anyone. She had only wanted something real. But she hadn't realized that pretending to be helpless in order to find love was a form of manipulation too. What hurt the most was not Jake's anger. It was the emptiness in his absence. She missed him, deeply. Each night, Claire stared at the cracked ceiling, wondering if he'd come back. Each morning, she listened to the footsteps outside, praying they'd stop at the door. They never did. One afternoon, Sophie came home early. She found Claire sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, her eyes swollen from crying. "You've barely eaten," Sophie said, placing a plate of beans and planting on the table. "I'm not hungry," Claire replied quietly. Sophie sat across from her, arms crossed. "You know, he's not just upset because you lied." Claire looked up. Sophie's voice softened. "Jake, he's been through a lot. He's the kind of person who gives everything to the people he loves. When our parents died, he gave up university to work and raise me. When I got sick, he sold his motorcycle to pay for my hospital bills. That land you heard him talk about, that was the one thing he held on to from our father. His last connection. He was going to give it up for you." Claire's stomach twisted with shame. "I never meant for it to go that far." "I know," Sophie said, exhaling. "But it did. And you owe him more than tears." Claire wiped her face. "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" "I think you need to stop hoping and start doing." That evening, Sophie made a call. "Jake, please come over. Claire has something important to say." There was a long pause on the other end. Then a quiet, "I'll think about it." Hours passed. Claire sat on the edge of the sofa, wearing a plain dress. Her hair pulled back. The lights were dimmed. Her palms were sweaty. She was ready to tell the full truth, everything. At 8:15 p.m., there was a soft knock on the door. Claire's heart stopped. Sophie opened it. Jake stood there, looking worn. His eyes met Claire's briefly, then turned away. "Thank you for coming," Sophie said before retreating to her room, leaving them alone. Jake didn't sit. He remained by the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Claire stood. Her knees trembled, but her voice was steady. "I want to apologize," she said. "Properly this time." Jake said nothing. "I came here with a plan. I wanted to disappear, to test if love could be real without wealth. So I pretended and I found you." She took a breath. "And you were everything I never knew I needed. Kind, generous, genuine. You saw me, not for what I had, but who I was pretending to be. And somehow, that version of me still felt seen. But I wasn't honest, and that makes everything I said feel like a lie." Jake's jaw tightened. Claire's voice cracked. "I wasn't expecting you to offer me shelter. I wasn't expecting your sister to take me in. And I definitely wasn't expecting you to sacrifice everything for me." A tear slid down her cheek. "You don't owe me forgiveness. But I had to try because I don't want to lose the first real thing I've ever known." Jake stared at her in silence for a long time. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. "When you first told me, I thought it was a joke," he said quietly. "I didn't believe you. Then I was angry, really angry, not because you're rich, but because you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth before I gave up everything." "I know," she whispered. "I kept thinking," Jake continued. "What else was fake? The laughter? The late-night chats? The way you leaned on me for guidance." Claire shook her head. "None of that was fake. Every moment with you was real." Jake looked down, then back up at her. "I don't know if I can forget," he said. "But I know one thing." Claire braced herself. "I miss you," he said, voice low. "Even after everything, I still think about you every day. And that's what makes this so hard." Claire stepped closer. "So, where does that leave us?" Jake didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached out and took her hand. "I don't have all the answers," he said. "But if we're starting over, let's start with the truth." Claire nodded, her heart finally exhaling. "No more lies," she said. "Ever." They stood there, holding hands, the unspoken beginning of something fragile, but real, from the hallway. Sophie peeked through the cracked door, a small smile on her face. She stepped back into her room, leaving them in peace. The following day, Claire surprised Jake and Sophie with an invitation. "Dinner. My treat," she said. They were hesitant, unsure what she had planned. That evening, she took them to a quiet, upscale restaurant on the edge of town. Jake looked uncomfortable, tugging at the collar of his borrowed shirt. "I don't belong here," he mumbled. Claire smiled. "You do. Trust me." They were ushered into a private lounge where Rachel, Claire's assistant, was already waiting. Jake's eyes widened in recognition. He had seen Rachel once on TV beside Claire Bennett during a Bennett Global Press Conference. Sophie's jaw dropped. "Is that?" Claire stood beside Rachel, cleared her throat, and said, "Jake, Sophie, it's time you met the real me." The chandelier above them sparkled like a crown, casting golden light across the polished floors of the private dining lounge. For a moment, Jake and Sophie Morgan sat frozen, their eyes darting between Claire and the well-dressed woman beside her. Claire wore a sleek navy dress. Her hair was swept into an elegant bun, and subtle diamond studs shimmered her ears. The transformation from the quiet, ragged, blind beggar they had taken into the poised, confident heiress standing before them was almost too much to process. Jake's voice was barely audible. "So, you really are Claire Bennett." Claire gave a small nod, her eyes locked on his. "Yes, and this is Rachel, my assistant. She's known everything since the beginning." Rachel gave him a respectful smile. "Nice to finally meet you both. I've heard a lot about you." Sophie crossed her arms, her tone sharp. "So, this dinner was to show us what we missed? A reminder that you're above us." "No," Claire said quickly, stepping forward. "This dinner is not to flaunt anything. It's to say thank you and to come clean." Jake remained quiet. He looked tired, not physically, but emotionally, like someone who'd spent too long trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "I don't even know what to say," he murmured. "It's like I don't know you." "You do," Claire insisted. You know the version of me that isn't hidden behind money or headlines. The one who sat beside you while you chopped onions. The one who listened to your stories. That was me. Always me. Rachel stepped aside as Claire approached the table and sat across from them. I wanted to explain everything from the beginning, Claire continued, her voice calm but sincere. After my parents died, I inherited everything, but it didn't bring happiness. Every man I dated was after my name, my bank account, or a contract. Gregory, my last fiancé, was the worst. I caught him planning to steal from me and disappear with another woman. Jake's brows furrowed slightly at the name. That broke something in me, she said, staring down at her hands. So I decided to do something drastic. I disappeared. No press. No bodyguards. I told Rachel to manage my affairs, and I came to Elmsworth to see if someone could love me for nothing. Sophie glanced sideways at her brother, then back at Claire, and you chose to pretend to be blind. I didn't want anyone to recognize me, Claire said, but I also knew I couldn't fake poverty without vulnerability. I needed people to look past what they saw. Jake let out a quiet breath. And we did. Claire looked at him with emotion brimming in her eyes. You gave me a home. Sophie gave me shelter. You both treated me like a human being. Not a name. Not a trophy. Silence hung between them. Then Claire pulled out 2 small envelopes and placed them on the table. These are not payments, she said. They're gifts. Inside the first is a document transferring ownership of a new shop in Elmsworth to you, Jake. Fully furnished. Stocked. Yours. Jake stared at the envelope without reaching for it. Claire turned to Sophie. And inside yours is an appointment letter. If you accept, you'll be the administrative supervisor for Bennett Global's Community Outreach Division in Lagos. A new role I created, because I've seen firsthand how capable you are. Sophie blinked. You're serious? Claire nodded. It's time I stopped running for my life, and I want you both in it. Jake finally leaned back, folding his arms. And what happens now? We take your gifts and you disappear again? No, Claire said softly. If you'll have me, I want to stay. He looked at her, unsure whether to smile or cry. I'm not asking for anything, she said. Just the chance to start over. With honesty this time. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up the envelope with his name. He didn't open it. He just looked at her. You know, he said slowly, I've always believed in grace, in second chances. But this is the first time someone made me feel like I was worth choosing. Claire's eyes welled up. He gave a soft chuckle. Even if you came into my life as a lie, the person you became while you were with us, that was real. He reached out and took her hand across the table. Sophie scoffed. All right, lovebirds. Let's not cry in public. Claire laughed through her tears. Too late. Rachel raised her glass. To second chances. They all raised theirs. Even Sophie, reluctantly. To real beginnings, Jake added. They clinked glasses. And for the first time in a long while, Claire felt peace. The following week, Claire returned to Lagos, but not alone. Jake and Sophie moved into a modern guest house on Claire's estate. Not a palace, but not a shoebox either. Just enough space for everyone to start fresh. Jake's new shop, Morgan Market, opened within the first month. It became a local sensation, mostly because word spread quickly that it was funded by Claire Bennett herself. But Jake refused to let her pay for everything. He worked daily, poured his soul into the business, and treated every customer like a friend. Sophie started her new role at Bennett Global, overseeing medical outreaches and scholarships in low-income neighborhoods. She was fierce, respected, and finally fulfilled. And Claire? She finally stopped hiding. But just as everything seemed to settle, a familiar shadow reappeared. One morning, Rachel barged into Claire's office, her face pale. You need to see this, she said, dropping a folder on Claire's desk. Inside were photos, surveillance shots, a man in sunglasses lurking near Jake's store, a blurred image of him watching Sophie's apartment, a newspaper headline with bold letters. Gregory Hale spotted in Elmsworth after mysterious disappearance. Claire's heart stopped. Rachel leaned closer. He knows where you are. Claire stared at the surveillance photos scattered across her desk like fragments of a broken past. Each image of Gregory Hale, her deceitful ex-fiancé, felt like a slap to the face. There he was, alive and well, walking the quiet streets of Elmsworth, casually watching Jake's new shop from a distance. He shouldn't be here, Claire whispered, her voice tight. He's looking for leverage. Rachel crossed her arms. If he's come this far, he's not just watching. He wants something. Claire leaned back in her chair, the weight of her secrets pressing harder than ever. I knew he might come after me, but I didn't think he'd find me here. Not after everything. Rachel hesitated. There's more. He didn't come alone. Claire's gaze snapped up. Rachel dropped a smaller envelope on the desk. Inside were images of a woman, tall, with striking features and a sharp resemblance to Claire. In one photo, she was holding Gregory's arm, and in another, she was stepping out a luxury SUV with him at the gate of Bennett Global's Legos headquarters. Claire's stomach dropped. No, she murmured. It can't be. Rachel sat down beside her. Her name is Camilla Rivers. She recently changed her surname legally to Camilla Bennett. Claire's heart thundered. That name, where did she get it? Rachel's voice was cautious. I did some digging. She's your father's daughter. Born to a woman he had an affair with years before you were born. No one in the public ever knew. But Gregory? He found her. Claire's mouth went dry. So Gregory married her? Rachel nodded. Yes. In secret. 3 weeks after you exposed him and disappeared. Claire stood abruptly, pacing the room. That's the real plan. They're coming for the company. Camilla's claiming to be a Bennett. And if she has Gregory guiding her, she'll try to take everything, Rachel finished. The room was silent for a beat. Then Claire whispered, We have to stop them. Meanwhile, back in Elmsworth, Jake was unloading crates of new inventory when he noticed a familiar figure across the street. Gregory, wearing a smug smile, standing too still for a man who claimed to be just passing by. Jake clenched his fists. Gregory waved casually and crossed the street. Jake Morgan, right? He said smoothly. Congratulations on the shop. It's impressive. Must be nice. Having a billionaire girlfriend. Jake's jaw tightened. What do you want? Gregory's smile didn't falter. Oh, I'm just here on business. Maybe visiting old friends. You were never a friend. Gregory leaned closer, his voice low. You think she told you everything? Claire may have bared her soul to you, Jake, but she left out the best part. Jake stepped forward, his voice cold. Leave before I make you leave. Gregory chuckled. You really think love is enough to protect her? Jake didn't reply. I'll be seeing you, Gregory said, walking off. Jake's hands were still trembling when Sophie arrived minutes later. What happened? She asked, alarmed. That man, Jake muttered. Gregory. He's planning something. Sophie's face darkened. We need to tell Claire. By the time Jake and Sophie arrived at Claire's Legos estate, Rachel was already coordinating security measures. Claire met them in the garden, visibly shaken but composed. There's something you both need to know, she said, leading them into the study. The photos were laid out on the table. Gregory, Camilla, legal documents, DNA test results. Jake picked up the report. She's really your sister? Claire nodded. Half-sister. I never knew she existed until now. Sophie exhaled. And Gregory married her? Claire's voice was quiet. Yes, that's their endgame. She'll claim her right to the Bennett estate as a biological heir, and Gregory will control it from the shadows. Jake folded his arms. But it's not just about money, is it? He wants revenge. Exactly, Claire said, for exposing him, for leaving him with nothing. This is how he plans to win. Rachel added, We have a legal fight ahead. Camilla is already preparing a petition to the board of directors at Bennett Global, demanding co-ownership rights. Jake looked at Claire. What can we do? Claire turned to face him. We stand together. With truth. We let the world see what kind of people they really are. The next day, Claire called an emergency press conference. She stood before dozens of cameras, reporters, and flashing lights. Jake and Sophie stood in the front row, Rachel by her side. Claire took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. My name is Claire Bennett. As many of you know, I am the heir to Bennett Global. But today, I'm not here to talk about legacy or money. I'm here to talk about truth. The crowd hushed. In recent days, a woman named Camilla Bennett has surfaced, claiming to be my half-sister. That is true. A DNA test confirms we share a father. I bear her no hatred for her bloodline, but I do bear concern for her intentions. She paused. Camilla is married to Gregory Hale, a man who once posed as my fiancé while plotting to steal from me, a man who, when exposed, vanished, only to return with a new plan, to take everything to my family's name. The room buzzed with murmurs. Claire continued, This is not a battle of inheritance. This is about manipulation, betrayal, and control. I may have been born into wealth, but I earned the right to lead this company with my integrity, and I will not hand over to a man who hides behind legal technicalities. Her eyes swept the room. This is not just my fight. It's a fight for every woman who has been used, lied to, and underestimated. For every person who has had to prove their worth again and again. She stepped back. The room erupted in applause. Jake and Sophie stood, clapping hard, pride shining in their eyes. 2 days later, the court ruled in Claire's favor. Camilla's claim to the estate was acknowledged as partial, but with clear evidence of Gregory's manipulation. The judge ordered a frozen trust to be overseen independently, denying him control of any operational power in Bennett Global. Gregory tried to save face, but was too late. His reputation was shredded in the media. Camilla, humiliated, retreated from the spotlight. Their plan had failed. Claire had won. But more than that, she had been vindicated, not by money, by truth. That evening, Jake found Claire sitting quietly by the garden fountain, staring at the stars. He sat beside her. You were incredible today, he said softly. Claire smiled, leaning into his shoulder. I was terrified. Jake chuckled. You didn't show it. She looked at him. Thank you for standing by me. You did the hard part. No, Claire whispered. Loving you has always been the easiest part. He turned, kissed her gently, and whispered, Then let's stop hiding from it. The sun filtered gently through the windows of Claire's estate, painting golden patches across the living room floor. It had been 3 weeks since the court ruling in her favor, but the calm that followed was deeper than any legal victory. The Bennett name had survived the storm. The empire was secure, and Claire had finally stopped running. She was no longer hiding behind sunglasses or false identities. She was exactly where she was meant to be, surrounded by people who had seen her stripped of every privilege and still stood beside her. Jake was now running Morgan Market Plus, a second shop Claire helped him open in a high-traffic Lagos neighborhood. But everything about the shop was his smile, his patience, his pricing system, even his handmade signs. He refused to let wealth change the simplicity he loved. Sophie had found her stride at Bennett Global's outreach division, heading campaigns for women's health, rural education, and entrepreneurship. She walked the halls of the headquarters like she owned them, and in many ways, she did. Claire watched all of it from a quiet place in her heart, grateful, changed. But just when she thought her story had reached its final page, fate turned it again. It happened one Saturday morning. Jake was out at the shop. Sophie had taken a weekend off for the first time in months, and Claire decided to visit one of Bennett Global's sponsored orphanages in Surleer, a place dear to her mother's heart. She arrived unannounced, hoping to spend a quiet morning with the children. But as she stepped out of her car, a staff member rushed up to her. Ma'am, we have visitors already, the woman said. They just arrived this morning. A woman and a little boy. Claire nodded. That's all right. She stepped inside and froze. There, seated in the common room, was Camilla, and beside her a boy, no older than 5. He had soft curls, almond eyes, and dimples identical to Claire's when he smiled. Camilla rose awkwardly as Claire approached. You're not supposed to be here, Claire said, her tone calm but cold. I know, Camilla replied. I didn't come to fight. I came to talk. Claire eyed the boy. He was playing quietly with building blocks. "Who is he?" Camilla's lips trembled. "His name is Eli. He's your nephew." Claire's breath caught. "Gregory's?" Camilla shook her head. "He's gone. Left 2 weeks ago. Took what little money we had and vanished. Again." Claire swallowed. "So why are you here?" "I have nowhere else to go," Camilla said, her voice cracking. "I thought I could outsmart you, take everything. But you fought with dignity. And when the dust settled, I realized I had nothing but a child who deserves better." Claire sat slowly, keeping her eyes on the boy. "You lied. Tried to take my life apart." "I know," Camilla whispered. "But I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for help." Claire was silent for a long moment. Then she looked down at Eli. "Come here, sweetheart," she said gently. The boy looked up, then toddled over to her. She helped him onto her lap and looked into his eyes. Something shifted inside her, a quiet recognition, not of blood, but of possibility. Claire looked at Camilla. "All right, I'll help you, but not for you, for him." Camilla nodded, eyes glistening. By the end of the month, Camilla was working in the orphanage's administrative office, under supervision, with terms in writing. She was given a 1-bedroom apartment on the property. Eli started school and quickly became a favorite among the staff and other children. Claire didn't publicize the move. She didn't use it to gain approval or praise. She just did it because healing didn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looked like redemption. The day Claire told Jake about Eli and Camilla, he listened quietly. "Do you trust her?" he asked. "No," Claire said honestly, "but I trust myself now. And I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you, even after you've messed everything up." Jake pulled her into his arms. "You've changed." "So have you." He smiled. "For the better." 3 months later, Claire stood under a white canopy draped with flowers, her hands trembling slightly in Jake's. The ceremony was small, just 50 people. No media, no photographers, just friends, staff, orphans, and Sophie, who stood beside her as maid of honor with tears glistening in her eyes. Claire wore a simple ivory gown. Jake wore a gray suit and an expression that looked like joy and peace had finally met. When the officiant asked Jake if he took Claire to be his wife, he said, "I already did, the day I handed her a meat pie outside the pharmacy." Laughter rippled through the crowd. When the officiant asked Claire the same, she replied, "I do. The real kind, not the kind written on contracts or measured in inheritance, but the kind that sees you when no one else does." Their vows were sealed with a kiss beneath the afternoon sun. Rachel clapped the loudest. Sophie wiped her eyes and muttered, "Finally." That night, back at the estate, Claire sat on the balcony with Jake, watching the stars. "Do you remember," she whispered, "when I was sitting on the street corner and you called me sister?" Jake chuckled. "I had no idea I was flirting with a billionaire." Claire nudged him. "You weren't. You were saving her." He kissed the back of her hand. "Maybe we saved each other." She smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Below them, the city of Lagos pulsed with life. Above them, the stars blinked in quiet celebration. And between them, love lived, not in riches, not in disguise, but in truth. 2 years later, Morgan Foundation for Blind opened its first center in Elmsworth. The sign outside read, "In honor of those who see beyond appearances." Claire, Jake, Sophie, and Eli stood at the entrance during the opening ceremony, surrounded by townspeople who once walked past a blind woman without a glance. But now they stopped to look, because she had helped them see.